Yeah, form transformation. It's kind of a big subject to actually cover. And what I actually decided to do, it's kind of a level 300, so people expect to get some advanced features. So what I actually want to do is show a transformation, and if anybody was in the merge tool session yesterday, there was a little application that was used, and that will basically be the example of this one. And there'll be some example of real life code also after that one from the base application. But let's start with something else. Going to the RTC, what is really my options for that one? Yeah, first of all, you could start with the RTC. That would be really nice. But most people actually comes from a world where they have all the information on forms or all the customization, ISV solutions, and things like that one. So you could manually go implement all the changes in the pages actually. And if you don't have too many customizations, that's probably a very good way to go actually. Or if your ISV products that you have in your solution is already on the Rotel client. So maybe it's much better to actually start and manually do the changes. The bad thing about it is you have to do a lot of testing, because you're basically going to write all your menu items again, and if you have special forms that could run on temporary tables and things like that one, all of it has to be tested from scratch again. So then the other option is, okay, let's do a transformation, but don't really care too much about how it looked to begin with, as long as it just compiles and we get the menu items over. And that's what I would refer to as kind of a quick and dirty. That can typically be done even for a decent size application in 3 to 4 days or something like that one. And you have everything or almost everything up and running. And yeah, the way to get it running is basically if the code don't compile, just put brackets around it and then deal with it later on in many cases. And then there's a complete repeatable transformation, and that's really something that should be considered very heavily before doing it. It's really expensive in time, also in the future actually of time. Microsoft do it, and many larger ISVs actually have needed to go that way. One of the reasons would be that you need to be able to both ship a product maybe in 5.0, but you also need to be able to ship on the Rotel client. And are you going to maintain it double, or are you going to try run transformation? And transformation is kind of a big hurdle to begin with, but as soon as the data is set up, you almost don't have to do very much to release it. It's like a 1-hour process, and then you have moved your application to the Rotel client, and most of it actually works after it has been set up the first time. So yeah, and why do the transformation? I already mentioned that the reuse of codes is that you actually minimize your testing a lot. So you don't have to completely test every menu item or every function that loads records in a temporary table or something like that one. You also get a single source for development. So if you have quite a big solution, it's maybe better to actually spend a lot of time up front and then being able to support your customers running on old versions also of that one. Especially this one is for ISVs, I would say. If I have a very large customization or have a special module written for me, instead of redoing everything, you can actually get a start on getting the pages out and then start modifying it manually and so on. And a lot of people actually do it for having a show version, so they can actually tell their partners, see, our product is actually in the Rotel client, but it's not really ready for download yet. And you can make it look real good in a short time, but finishing is the one that takes a lot of extra effort. So what is the transformation then? It's actually an external program, and it's really like a programmer. It just do a lot of tasks for you. And there's a lot of data controlling the task also. Microsoft actually ships data that is around, depending on versions, between 5,000 and 8,000 records in 13 different tables actually. So it's not 1 or 2 fields in each table. There's multiple fields, all kinds of things in there. Basically, the process is that you export the forms, you export the data from the transformation, then you run a process, import the pages and compile, and then you're done. That's not how it works in real life a lot of times. So many times it's also possible or necessary to actually get transformation data for an ISV. So you sometimes need to actually get data for an ISV that not even is in business any longer, or a solution that is actually not sold, and you end up with all kinds of issues. Maybe you have to recreate it yourself, and an even worse thing is you actually don't have a license that can create the pages where it's supposed to be actually. And that's kind of a real tough thing actually. there is something to do about the pages that don't exist, and I can tell you later when I'm not on the recording here how to do that. So, yeah. So let's look at, before I go this one and say, let's look at a transformation tool in here. And each version of NAV, each country has a different transformation tool. And I have the W1 2009 R2 version in here. And now I actually extract those files and take a look what's in there. And I'll just put it in here. So one thing that comes is actually some XML files, and that's a delete element. It's some input data. There's some ignore pages. There's some move elements and move pages. And down here is actually where all the information is, transform pages. And it's almost 1 megabyte actually of XML data that is in this file. It also comes with a tool that actually works with it, and that's here in what is called the TIFF editor. And there's an application, and then there's also some data in here. So let's go try and import that one. And I have a classic client here, and that's where I will need to import my objects into. I deleted the subfile again, so I have to go through every pass to get anywhere here the first couple of times. But that's my TIFF file. And when I click yes, there's 73 new objects. So there's really no changes. And it's all in a range. Oh, I have a filter on it, so it won't find anything in here. There's really two ranges that were imported. This one is what is called the TIFF editor, but there also is some functionality that actually interfaces with Developers Toolkit. It allows you to do some simple lookups, like lookup for controls and things like that one against Developers Toolkit actually. But the general application is in this area. As a customer, it's kind of an issue because getting this one in your license is actually not possible. So you have an issue with that one. But let me go here and filter on, actually I only want to see this number, because if I look at the pages or forms here, there's a list of forms and there's something about fact boxes, home parts, but really your starting point is this form in here. So let me go run that one. And there's no data in here, but the first thing to do is reestablish what Microsoft actually gave us for this first version. So I want to go here and do my setup. And this one is where I will put my path in, so where I exported it here. I need to copy that path and put it in here. And that's the setup, and then I will go back here and import all my transformation input. This one importing the file, XML files that I mentioned before, and if I go look at something like sales order, for example, it actually has a lot of information in here. First of all, the most important thing is what is called primary data. So you basically specify what type it is as form, and then you get a page type out of it. And if I look up right now, I don't have anything in here, and that was actually the data that was in another folder. So let me go here and import my form type to page type mapping. And again, I have to browse to it here. It's in the TIFF editor folder the same way. So you get that information in there, and now I actually have a lookup. One thing that differentiates the Rotel client from the classic client is that in a classic client, you basically start out with a blank sheet of paper on a form, and then you start adding components to it. In the Rotel client, it's very different. You actually pick a type of a page, and then the Rotel client render it totally different. You can have almost the same data set, create a list, and also it can actually create a card, and it's just a question of changing one page type actually in here. So let me show you an example of how powerful that one actually is. So I'll go here to a page, and I'll go down to the customer card, for example. And I will go down at the bottom and say, I'll view my properties. And there is a page type down here, and right now it's set for a card. Let's do it as a list in here, and then save it. And then try run it. It did. Good example. Yeah, I wonder if that's the issue. Yeah, TechDays. Well, it should be the right one. There's compile issues sometimes, but I sort of gotten around all that one. Oh, okay. Let's skip that one, and I hope it actually works what I'm going to do next and so on. But basically you select this one, and this one is the type of form you have in the system, and this one is actually the type of page type you will have out here. The number of page types is actually quite a lot of them out here, and there is in the online help a description what each of them actually do and what the differences is. Because one of the things, there is like a worksheet, there's a list plus, there's a list also in here, and there is something called a list part. And it really sounds like a list, all of them, but each of them have a special purpose actually. One being a fact box, another one being like a journal kind of thing, where it actually update fields in a button and things like that one. And there is a good description of them in the documentation in the online help. So, but I have some new forms in here, and this one was Microsoft's data, and I can go down and look at my sales order in here, and actually look at some inputs. And there's something in here, there's some actions, and the control ID is the key in here. There's also all kinds of other things in here. But let's start with my own tables, or my own forms in here. So the first thing to do is actually to go to what is called get forms. And I would just, to prevent getting too much here, I would just put in a filter like this one. So I'm 100% sure only getting my own objects in here right now. So I didn't have a 50,000, I have something, another number. So here it is. That's my own forms, and they come in as not being filled out in here. So if I have to look up, this one is shipment description codes. My guess is that's actually a list, so I'll select that one. And it put out a page type out here. Then I'll go down and say that's a shipment description card. And that's probably a card, but that's always not true actually, because what is typically is a document. That's actually something that have a main header and a list form attached to it underneath actually. So anything that is a header list concept actually needs to be a document instead of a card. So, and you can see the difference out here. They actually map to two different types and they behave a little differently. And I will go down, that's my subform list. And there actually is a subform list down here, so that's probably the one. Then I have some commission groups, and it looks like plural. And that's probably a list too. And this one is a customer compare, and wonder what that is. It would be nice really to have a run button down here, but let's go look at this form number in here to actually figure out what it is. So get back to Object Designer. It's kind of a weird form. It's something that has validation code to retrieve record. It's basically showing 6 customers in a row, and I don't know why anyone would do this one, but it's showing off some kind of features that I'll actually show later in here. So this one is kind of a card, but it's also a different type in here. There's something that is called a fixed layout. And that's more to specify it because you can really see it maps to a card anyway out here. So this one is the primary data I have to fill in. I have to fill in a lot more things to actually get it working. But for now, I can go and run my first transformation in here. And I'll go down here under functions and create transformation input. This one where I used to before import them, now I'm actually writing XML files instead, and I will say yes and export all of it in here. I have some slides at the end, by the way, about why you export everything instead of the few ones you're actually doing and things like that one. There's almost no possibility to run a partial transformation of anything and get a decent result out of it. So I have all the exported objects into input files, and if I go look here, I've of course see my date here is, my time is set for US, by the way, so it's quite early in the morning over there. But you can see all these files actually updated here. The next thing I have to do is export my objects, and I will go here and say I want to export just my forms in here. And then I'll go export, and I have to pick everything again here one time. and they have to be called forms.xml. There is a new source code format that is called XML down here, and it only works for exporting forms and reports because that's the only two object types that actually is supported in here. So I will need to export it as XML and then save that one. So I now have created my input file, I created my objects I want to run on, so now I actually want to run the transformation. And I'll double click on this file down here, and it actually runs the transformation. And the window closes, I didn't even see what happened in here, so it's kind of not a nice thing because it could error out, but I wouldn't really see it in a lot of times, it just closes the window. So what normally I do in here is basically I call create a bat file, where I actually will run it from, and then I can go in and edit that one, and I'll have to and then I just pause at the end here. That means it will wait for a keyboard input. So if I now run the execute here, it actually do everything, and it waits for a keyboard input here so I can see if it actually went good. This one is the one line you actually want to look for. The transformation is completed. And a lot of times you have, especially in the beginning, that it won't even start maybe. It will actually error out in one of the first steps in creating or verifying the input files. So that was my first transformation. So I actually now want to go import, and my output is called pages.xml. And then here you have a new date, time, and changed on here. So I import those ones, and let me apply a filter here for these numbers because I'm going to use them all the time also in here for exporting. And I can see my objects down here. They're not compiled. So let me go here and actually compile them. And I get an error on one of them down here, shipment description codes. That's an error. And they say out the run object action is not supported. And what it actually is a data port that is called from a menu item. So, but I'll fix that one later. But let's try to see how one of them looks. And I'll have my shipment description codes down here. It's not fun if this one is going to work like that. Oh, that's the one that actually could not run, by the way. That's the one that didn't compile. So if I try run this one, I'll get the error in here that the object metadata didn't exist. For the road-seller client, there is a table behind the scene where actually all the C# code exists in. It launched the second road-seller client because I didn't answer the questions before I launched it again. There's a table called object metadata, and let me go find that one in here. And you can see in here it's a table where it has every object in it except forms and data ports in here. And there is a couple of blob fields in here being these asterisks. This one is actually the C# code that was compiled or created at the same time when you compiled the object, and that's what the road-seller client actually uses. So if you have a problem with something not updating properly, you can actually go in here and try to delete it and compile again, and then you would actually see if it's either a compile issue or something else actually in here. There's no harm done deleting all these records as long as you go compile the application one more time, and it will actually work after that one. This metadata also is version specific. So if you're running a Service Pack 1, the C# code is a little different than running an R2 release actually. So depending on hotfixes, sometimes you have to recompile all of them actually in here. But that's where it stores all the data in here. Let me go down and take a look at another object in here. And run another page. This one was my description card. And as I run that one, I actually had a pretty neat form in here. I had, if you looked at the classic client, I had two fields under each other, and then I had a subform underneath. So I didn't even have to do anything in here to actually get this one working fine, and it works in here. There is one problem with this one, and that's actually something about deleting that menu item that is on there. And I can go back in my transformation data and actually do this one. So if I go in here and try compile it, I'll see that what I'm trying to do here is actually running a data port. So I will go up here and say my ID, that is the whole key to the transformation tool. I want to copy that value in here. And then say, okay, that's fine. And then go back in here and look at my object, the shipment code, and then add some inputs. There's many different kinds of inputs down here. You can add new properties and things like that one. But one of them here say that you can actually delete a page control. So I can go in here and say this control ID, I want to get rid of it and put it in the list in here. So if I now go and actually do all my objects, export them, yeah, it's a data, sorry. Yeah, it's a data, yeah. So it finished the export of the data, and then I can run my execute out here. And now it goes through and run again. And as I get into the object designer, I can open up my pages.xml, import it, and compile them. And now it actually compiles. So this case, I actually took that menu item out of the page now. So if I go in and view my actions, I can see that I now only have one action that is actually card in here. And card was really something is like, if you looked at it, there's really no cards and lists buttons left anywhere in the Rotator client because it's actually dealt with in what is called more like a double-click action. And the reason it didn't work right now is because I didn't specify a second piece in here. Because if I go down here and look at it, I have a shipment description code, and then I have a card in here. And on the code, on the list, you need to specify what card form is this one actually using. This one enables a double click. And there's only really one way of doing this one. So you have to have a list for each card form. You can't use one list form and open up many different card forms. If you look in the standard product, you see that there's a sales quote list, there's a sales order list, there's a sales invoice list, and so on. In the 9,000 range, that's actually how Microsoft solved it by adding multiple forms or pages to actually deal with the list issue. So I want to have this one, and then go in and say that should be my 50,011, and I can see out here there's a flow field calculating that, hey, this one is actually used for a list for this one out here now. So let me go and export the data. And you're going to see this export constantly. It's all the time that you actually do this one again and again. You have to do that all, for the whole data every time. So let's go run my bat file here. And it created my transformation out here. Go in and go to the object designer, import, and then compile down here. And if I now look at this one in the designer, and I go down to view actions, I can see I have nothing any longer. How did it happen that it actually took this one out of here? And how did it figure out that it was exactly that button it should do? There actually is several things that works like that one. And let me first run it so you can see the result now. I have a list in here. I have nothing. And if I click new here, I'll just create one that this one is my first code, and this one is a test code. And I can add some lines in here. So, and if I now have a code in here, I can actually double click on this one. And that's all related to that card form ID. This action of double clicking, it cannot be programmed. You can only live with, it's a property, and that's how it is actually. And the way to specify it in the transformation tool is basically to go in and put the card form ID in, and then you will have the right information actually showing up in there. So if I go back and look at my PowerPoint here, I want to actually follow this one. So I had my form page type that I did, and then I did my card form ID. There's a few other things. One thing is you can ignore a form, and matrix forms in the classic client is a good example of that one because there's really no way of just transforming that one and having it working. So you basically ignore that form. And then you have another one that actually is a destination ID. So you build a new form that you can set up a destination ID for, and it will actually replace that one. So let's go look at the data that comes from Microsoft about this information. You can see out here, there's for this 9,000 item tracking code card, there's a destination ID. So whatever that object was, it's actually going to be replacing this 6512 in here with this one. And what is replacing meaning? It's actually meaning that when it runs the transformation, it reads through all the source code. It can be a run form with a number. It can be a menu item. All kinds of things like that one is actually going in and replacing it in here. And that's mean, I mentioned that you basically cannot do this one without exporting everything every time. If I just did these 5 objects and I exported my data, I would not have all the transformation in base Navision. And let's say I had a menu item that actually showed the customer card in one of these ones. When I clicked on this transformation, because I didn't have the data about the customer card with the card list form relationship, I would actually not have that menu item transformed correctly and so on. So that's one of the real scary things about transformation, because it's like you don't really know, you're working in an isolated area, but if you're touching the base application, you basically need to go do everything in here. So, so that's those ones. The other thing I went and did was actually removing that control. There was a data port, and you just do it here by simply deleting the page control in the data for the form where it's currently on. So let's move a little forward. And this one is like right now, my page in here is actually not very interesting. And I can go down on my commission group in here and actually run that one. And I can see up here I have a new button, but I actually have some related information about sales lines and all kinds of things like that one. It would be real nice to get it up here that it is in standards Microsoft, where you have the most used buttons would actually be up here in the action pane. So let's go see if we can fix some of that one. And the first thing I need is actually my control ID. So if I go here and view my actions, I can see I have my sales line and things like that one. And I'm looking at it right now from the Rotel clients for all the pages, but the control IDs actually stays exactly the same between the classic client and the Rotel one. So you can actually look at the form or the page. So I need my control ID in here. I need to go then into my transformation, go add some input, and I want to add a new or promoted action in here. And I can go in and say I want it to be an action item, meaning that it's a menu ID. I want to add a control ID in there. And then I want to go ahead and say I actually want to promote this one. So this one means that I'm actually going to move it from just being in my menu to also being in my action pane up here. I can do something else in here. I can also promote it big. So when you see the post button, for example, is really big, but the statistics button on a sales order is much smaller for that one. So you can go do that one in here simply by selecting promoted. Big is yes also in here. So let's go ahead and do that one. And I changed some data, so I'm going to do everything again in here. One of the things, there's actually 2 or 3 steps you have to do every time. You have to export the transformation data, you have to export the objects. And a lot of times you don't need to do all of them. But if you forget one of them, suddenly your output is actually kind of weird. So the best thing is almost to run a process every time to do it. So I run my transformation, and then I come back here and import it on my pages. And let's do compile them. And then run this one in here. And see, now I got my sales lines. But come on, it's an ugly icon. I just got what it's a gray circle in here. So let me add another one in here. And this one is my, let's do a commission that is called high. And then I can actually click on sales lines. And it will actually go open up the sales lines that are using that high commission group. And I didn't have anything yet. So I actually can go create a sales order. And let's just see that it actually works like I expected in here. So go into my commission. And I will just create a sales order here that's a one more zero. So I created that one, and if I go back to my commission group, if I now look at sales line, I'll see the one sales line I just created that is in that commission group. So all that one works nicely. It took all of it. but I want to do something about that icon in there. And you can do that one also, and it's actually kind of a hidden field. And I know why it is, because you can't see, show columns instead of that one. There's a column called image in here, and if I look at that one, I have a list of images in here, but I really have no way of knowing how they actually look. So I can go look at it and say, guess there's maybe something called document. That will probably look good in here. So I'll add that one. And repeat. This one is typically something that you don't want to run necessarily on a server, because you're going to wait a long time for this export every time if you have to move the 5,000 records across the network also. So you want to run some of this local, or at least somewhere where it's fast. So I'll finish that one, and then I go import the pages in here, and I will go ahead and compile them. So now I have a document icon up here, and that looks way better than the white circle that I actually had up there. The users, of course, can customize also. So if I actually went in and customized this page as a user, and I put one of the other ones that I didn't put an image on up there, then they will see the white ugly circle anyway. So you could have repeated that image on all the other controls if you wanted to down here. And you'll see later on when I actually use something else for populating this data, it gets quite easy actually to do that one. So I got my image and I got my promoted action that I actually added up here. I assigned it an image. The other thing you can do is adding new menu items. So if you have a list, for example, in the classic client, there's typically very few menu items on there. And maybe you want to add a report so people can actually from the list print the report instead of going to the card. You can also go ahead and add a completely new menu item opening a different form, for example. So if I go in again on my commission group, I actually want to add some input again. It's a new or promoted action. And before I took the item, but I can also go in and say I want to add something to the report section in here. And I want to have a promoted image, description, caption. I'll wait a little with that one. I want to run a report. What report should it be? It should be the customer top 10. It's down here. And I now added the report. If I try to do this one without anything else, you would actually see that I would have something I could click on, but there would be nothing actually to see at that time. So I actually have to specify the property of what the caption actually should be from it. So E and U equal to my customer list, and I happen to take a copy of that report name before I actually return to this form in here. You can also go and promote it, and the same way as before, you can actually add something. And let's see if there's a report. See, there actually was a report image down here, so that's probably going to look good also. So again, do it all of it here. And go back and import and compile. One thing that can throw you off here, by the way, you can see I got a small icon for it, and I got my report up here in my list. If you have this object actually open, and you try to go back and do all kinds of things, and it's already open in here, it actually will not change, because the role to a client, as long as the object is what is called active, it won't read the new version from the metadata until it's not active in the session any longer. So you would have to always remember to close it to actually run it like this one in here. So yeah, so that's the different kinds of things you can do about promoting. And the other thing you can do is making fields promoted. Because if you go in and look at it in the NAV, if I go to an order card, I can see when I collapse this band up here, I have some nice information up here. So even if everything is collapsed, I can almost understand my complete order. And you again have to pick the control ID and add it to promoted actions up there. So let's go back here, and I have my shipment description card in here. Let's go to the form, because that's really why you want to do it. So this one is my control ID. It's not the field number, it's actually the control ID. So I take a copy of that one. And then I'll go in my shipment card and add some additional input in here. And it's a new control property. And it's actually a control property to say I want to promote this field in here. And put in the control ID. And that's what I do. The other thing I could do was actually do something that is called additional. And if I look at my sales order as it is, if I open this one again, I have this one show fewer fields, show more fields. All the ones that are not shown is actually what is called additional in there. So let's go add the other one. Oops, it was additional fields. And it's actually the control ID 2 higher, so I don't have to go open up my form again to actually look at it. If you had Developers Toolkit underneath, you can see there is a lookup arrow, and you can actually see some of the control information underneath it in here. So I added a little information, and let's go run it again here. So this one's get kind of repetitive with this constant running, but I want to show one feature at a time instead of doing a whole bunch of things and not showing what the output actually is of it. So that's why I'm running it again and again here. So import it. And go down and run my shipment card. So if I now collapse this band, I have my test up here, and I can do show more fields, and it didn't make much sense. So if you're actually going to use additional field, you should pull at least 3 fields off a tab, because else this button takes the same amount of space that you're actually saving. So you're not going to see much more anyway. So it's typically where in the sales order where you actually pull out all the address information and things like that one. It makes a lot of sense because it's shrink the form a lot in the vertical direction. So that's how you do the promotion of fields in here. Oops, that was not the PowerPoint. And then there's something about fixed layouts. I showed you that form with the 6 customers listed actually. Let's see how that actually looks, because it worked fine. It compiled, so it must look good in the Rotel client also. And let's run it in here. And whoa, it's kind of interesting in here. This one is because it's just transformed it as a card, and it even only put it in one single column actually in here. So it's kind of real bad how it actually looks in here. There is something that is called a fixed layout. And if I go look at my object in here, the customer compare, I selected a fixed layout. That absolutely do nothing at all for me. What I have to do is actually go down and say, which one is the column headers for this one? So let's go look at my form here, my customer compare. And I have these controls up here. And this one happens to be 13, 15, 17, 9, and 11. And I'll see if I can remember all of them here, so I don't have to go copy-paste them. So the order of these one you actually specify them in is actually how the columns will show up. So I've just put them in numerical order. These 2 last columns out here would actually show up first instead of last, as it is actually right now. So I have my numbers in here, and I will go in and say, let's do some other input in here. And it's again a new control property. It's something that is called a fixed layout. And my first one should be the 13. The next one should be the 15. The next one 17. And then I think it was 9. And the last one is 11. So I now added a specification. And what the requirement is let me go back to the run here, is that actually the position of these one needs to be kind of the same. And that's the way that it actually will identify it and say, if this one is a column header, anything that starts on the same X position and coming underneath actually needs to follow up. And that's something that is called a group in the page, if you looked in the page designer to do something similar. So, but let's run this one again and create all transformation input. and go run the batch file again when it's done. So I now got my pages again, and let's go import them, compile them, and then take a look at how it actually ended up being. And no, it's not the one I have open down there. So let me run it now. It looks way better, but there's still a lot wrong with this one actually out here. There's missing all the column headers, and I have some weird number hanging out here. So what is this kind of thing? It's actually something that is kind of a little tricky, because what I can do, I can actually go in here and fix this. If I go on this label, it's a label that is currently attached to this control down here. You would assume that it actually would take the column header from that label, from the table, but it's actually not doing it. So let me go in here and do a fix and say I want to do my number, and my caption here for this, for the name, should be name. Translation-wise, this one is actually not doing anything at all. If you have a translation tool where you only see each of them one time, it should identify this one and automatically translate it to the other ones, because it's just the same as a field name. I just add them as captions up here. And then I save my object. And now I have to export these ones again, because now I actually changed my forms in here. So I'll go ahead and save them as form.xml and run my batch file out here. And I didn't export my transformation data because I didn't change anything right now. So I can actually reuse it as it was in here. So let's import my pages and run this customer compare down here. Now I've got the headers back here. It looks way better. I still have this weird hanging number out here. There's two things you can do about it. You can actually go in your form and say, it's the first control up here that actually drives it. And you could go in and say this one, the caption on this one, instead of being number, it should maybe be customer. The other thing you can do is actually you can turn off the one saying show caption. And nope, you can't do that one because of this kind of field in here. So sometimes you can turn the caption off and it will actually do that one. But I put this one now as number. And then export. I'm using the keyboard a little here, sorry. So you get pretty tired of doing these constant trial and errors here. So you go and run it, and now it's a customer, and I have that one. And I can go, this one is actually a code that has validation code in the after get record trigger. And you can see it actually works perfect. I didn't have to do anything. It actually transformed it nicely. Let's just take a look at what actually happened during the transformation, because it's kind of interesting what it actually did. I used to have my code up in the on after get record trigger. Now it actually calls a function called on after get record down here, and it's way down here. On after get record, the only thing I did was call find customer, and my find customer was actually the function that I actually did in here. So this one's kind of is an overkill of what it's actually doing, because it's making way too many functions, but it's making a consistent way of making it work all the time. So if you do the quick and dirty, you probably want to go in and change this one up and correct it for the transformation tool. So that's column labels, and that's how you fix the layout. And then you basically add the captions directly in the labels to make it look nice after that one. Let's do something new, like adding a fact box. A fact box is one of the really, really cool things about the Rotel client, and extremely useful. I can see out here a customer sales history. I can see all kinds of things out here about it. One of them being notes, and these ones up here being kind of like card-style objects, actually. This one is actually 5 objects in here. I have my main card, I have my subform, and these one are individual subforms or kind of subforms, but they have a special type in the system. So let me create another one in here, and I'll go in and say I want a new form. And I'll have my shipment list, and I think that's 11, shipment description lines. I want to create a tabular form, and I want just to have my shipment, no, I don't want that field. I want my text field in here. and actually just finish it. And that's my form. It looks great. I'm just going to save it, and 50,031, and that's shipment description fact box. So I saved my new shipment description fact box down here, and if I run it, of course can see my individual lines that are in here and things like that one. I need to add more data now because I actually added a new object in here. So I'll go ahead and do the get form function that I actually did in the beginning, and I'll get my new form in here. So now I have my new form, shipment description fact box, and I'll go ahead and say this one actually should be a info part of the type list. An info part is basically a fact box, so that's how you actually use it. So it's an info part list. And the one I showed before was actually an info part card instead of, or just an info part actually. The one I showed for the sales order. That was so I have my new list, and how do I then attach it to my shipment description card in here? You actually go down and add a fact box. And I can go in and add a page, and my page part ID is 50,031. And if I do this one, I can see my name. And one thing that tricks you all the time, by the way, is this visible. You add everything, and nothing shows up in the rotor client. That's because this one defaults to not show the fact box. And then there's something called a subform link and a provider ID. Subform link is basically like you have a list underneath a sales order, and that's actually what drives it. So the easiest way to do that one is simply go in and say, yeah, I'm going to add it to my card in here. I'll design that card. I'll put in a new subform, and I don't care where it is. It's there. There's a nice place. I'll go in here and say my subform ID is 50,031, and how do I do my link down here? Then I'll go in and say, I need my description code to actually be a filter, and that should match my code actually in here. So this one is a real simple relation, but it could be that you actually needed to filter on document types and all kinds of other things like that one. And I then will copy this subform link, and this one is just a subform link in the classic client. So what I do here is just say, yeah, that's fine. Throw this all away, and then actually put it in here. And that's my link now. So what is the provider ID? If you look at my order in here, and if I actually go here and click on this one, look at this sales line detail, it actually changes depending on what line it is. If you have a subform that is actually the one you're going to do the filter for, that's actually your provider ID. So the subform control ID, that's what you would have put in the provider ID actually in here. And you can see an example of that one in standard Microsoft code, of course. I need to leave it blank because I don't have any thing I actually need in here. The other thing I can do is actually add something else. And let's say I have pages now. I also want to add system parts. And this one is hard-coded parts that exist in the Rotor client. And I can see my notes, I can see notes, I can see the Outlook, and you can see the Outlook is actually the component that sits inside the row centers. And then you have record links. But I want to add the notes section so people can actually go write note sections also. And of course I want to make it visible also in here. So I now created some data, and I created a form. So now I actually have to do everything. So I have to go here and say, yeah, export this one to forms.xml, and then go here and select all of them, and say, functions, create all transformation input. Seems like it's getting slower and slower, so, but I guess it's don't. So I run my transformation, and I go back here and say, okay, now import my pages, and compile everything. And I got my new page down here, so as I compile, I can see that one. If I go run my shipment description card, I'll see that now I actually have my shipment description fact box. That was not a very good name. I probably want to have called that something else. And then I have my notes section down here. So this one is how it actually shows up. It links them all together. And if I go here and do next on that one or new, you see that the fact box shows up empty out here. It didn't have any of the lines down here. So if I put AAA, and yeah, that's fine. Oh, okay, that's fine. I don't know why it wouldn't rename. If I wanted to reapply that fact box to my list also, it's where it's get really easy to actually do it. So I go in here and take my fact boxes, and I'll copy those ones, put them on my shipment codes, do input, add fact boxes, and then put it in here. And again, of course, do it again. Factbox is almost like a no-brainer programming-wise. It's so easy to do them, and it's one of those things you can, if you have a pretty big application, you look, oh, I'm going to use like 100, 200 factboxes. When it actually look at it, many times you end up with 20, and that's actually it. You just keep on reusing them, and you set up a different link from all over the places, and that's all you have to do actually in there. So I exported it. I have to remember to run it also. And then go and open up my pages or my file in here, compile. And now if I run my list also, I also have my fact box on here the same way as I have before. A lot of fact boxes, you want to add menu items up here in the lightning bolt. You can actually do that one, and you can even implement the double click in here. So let me show you how you actually do that one. If I go into my description fact box, first of all, I want to correct the caption because it's saying right now that long name in here. So I'm actually going to call it a caption, and I'll just call it lines. And then that will solve that issue about having the long ugly name. Then I want to have the ability to actually double click, and these buttons are not doing anything, so I can get rid of those ones and then add another one. And yeah, just my neat freak is actually doing this one, but there's really no reason for it. And then you can go in and add a caption on this one. And the caption needs to be open to actually make it work. And then you go in and say, okay, what should run? And when I push this button, I want to go ahead and actually run, or let's do form.run, and it should be, what was the number of the cards in there? It was 11 in here. Now I changed my forms, so now those have to be exported. That's a little faster than another one at least. Run my transformation. And then go import them. So if I now go in and look at it, my shipment codes, as I run that one, I now have, let's look at the test. If I double click out here, first of all, I think I was too fast there. Or did I do something wrong? No, I don't have it open. Now I got my open. But the other thing, because the caption were open, I can actually double click on that one. And then, okay, I guess I picked the wrong table actually to run it for, or the run form to actually run it for in here. But yeah, I don't want to go back and fix it, so I'm kind of pressed on time here. So you can link it very easily like that one also. Then there's something else, code rules.txt. You haven't seen anything that say code rules in here. So what is this one? Let me make a very special form in here. Not a very special, it's very common to have forms like this one that actually try to control the visibility and editable on forms in here. So I go in and say I want to have a card form, and it should have the number, it should have the name, and it should have the address on there, and then finish it. And I want to go in and say in my after get current record code, I actually want to go in and say I want to do current form, controls, name, properties, editable, and it should be like, this one is real ugly hard coding, but it should be equal to 10,000. So if my customer number is 10,000, or editable, it should be name, of course. No, it should be number out here. Number. And in here, I want to change it to address also. So this one was some code that actually can control it. And let me save that one. It's 50,032. And I can go ahead and run that one. And I can see these fields are non-editable until I actually get to customer 10,000, and then I can edit them and so on. In the early days, it was always like, hey, there can't be any forms on pages in here, or any code on pages. So is this one really working? Let me go and add my new form in here. Set up that this one actually is a card. Go compile it. No, go export it.
Always in this section.
Oh no. Yeah, too many hotkeys here. And it exported, and then I'll go ahead and run it. And then go down on my customer edit down here, and it compiled fine. So if I run it, I can see here, and exactly why is this one not working? Oh, it's, yeah, thank you, yeah. Okay, I'm working from Denmark, I guess. So now I'm in edit mode, and it's hard to tell that it's actually not editable in here. But if I go here and say next record, control page down, until I find 10,000, I'll see that suddenly I can actually now go in and actually type in this field. If I go to next one, it turns non-editable again, so I can't do anything in here. Okay, so that actually worked. I didn't have to do anything at all. And if I look in the page in here, I can go in and see it has something more on init up here. And if I look at my global variables, it actually created global variables for each of these functions in here also. And there's one property in here that is actually very important, and that's to include in data sets. If you look at how the roadseller client runs, it runs all the code on the service tier, and then the page is actually rendered on the roadseller client. So this one about being editable and hidden, I think that one is actually a client feature. So you need to include your variable in the data set to be able to actually get it out to the client to render the field as it did before and so on. If I look at my controls down here, it went in and said on this one, there is in the editable feature saying, hey, the name is setting equal to the variable. It would be nice in here and saying, hey, I don't want to use this one. I actually want to use an expression, and I could have put in here and saying, hey, if the number is equal to 10,000, it will not work. It only works if you use a Boolean variable of the type in dataset, and that's it. So that's what it actually did, but it converted it fine for me here. So let's go say I need to do a little more in here, because people should actually, if it's customer 20,000, they should also be able to edit the name, for example. So I will say if it's in 20,000 also, 20,000, and so I now say that, yeah, this one is my expression in here, and I save my form, and I export them. I run the transformation. I import them again. Compile. And now the object don't compile any longer. So why could I figure it out the first time and not the second time? Just because I made a little more advanced code in here. If I actually go look at it, I'll see in here that editable. It seems like what it did before is completely failing in here, because it's like it didn't even try to do some of the replacements in here. So let's go look at the code rules.txt in here. And this one is quite a big file. It's 28 kilobytes. And if I go in and look at it, it has all kinds of expressions in here. This one is basically a long list of regular expressions that is run on all source code in here. So I can go in and see, What is this one in here? If I have a begin and a semicolon, replace it with a begin. Okay, that makes sense. And if I do this one, if I have a variable different from a variable, then semicolon, that code do absolutely nothing, then replace it with a semicolon. This one is actually code cleanup that Microsoft themselves actually doing in here, so it's kind of weird to put it in here. But let's search for editable in here, because that was what I actually wanted to look at. Oops, that was very bad. And you can see there's many different expressions down here with editable. And if I get down here at, I think that one, and I can say current form, now that's visible, and it's replacing visible with editable. Down here is where it actually say current form, variable name. That was my name field. Editable and parentheses, something back here. That was actually not what I had. I had something like if a variable was equal another variable. Aha. That was a formula that actually did the replacement the first time and that failed the second time because I changed the expression in here. So what you can do in here is actually go in and say, yeah, I have this one, and if that one is in that one, comma, another variable number 4, and in brackets, I have a caps lock on, I think, yeah. I don't think it make a difference with uppercase, lowercase, but I don't want to run that. So actually going in here and say, this expression should really be replaced with this expression also. This mean if you have quite complex expressions in this one, you basically have to go and put a whole bunch of code rules in here to actually fix your issues. But I now added this new code rule, and they will now find that one. But what about that thing about creating a variable? How did that actually happen? And you can actually go up here and look at it, and I can see when I find current form, a variable editable, then you can go in and declare a variable, and it should be whatever that name was, editable, and it should be Boolean in datasets. So this one is actually, it's extremely hardcore, these kinds of things. It's like trying to change this kind of expressions. There's a pretty good chance you're going to mess something up in here. So it's a very good idea to save the code rules.txt that it came with, or go get the other one with if it get messed up. So, but basically I want to save this one and go run my transformation. Import and compile. And, oh, I ran the transformation. Did I save the, did I make a wrong expression in there? Ah, yeah. Oh, that one, yeah, yeah, thanks. And I missed it both places. Now it's even worse. Oh, it's in the wrong place, yeah. Okay, now I had an exclamation mark in the middle of something, yeah. Ah, it worked. Or at least it imported. So, and then I'll go run this one, and now it actually worked. And if I go to my next record, until I find my 20,000, I can see my name is not editable. Oh, what did I do wrong here? Oh, yeah, edit mode, yeah, thank you. Now I can change that one, but I can't change that one, and if I go back to 10,000, I can change both of them in here. So, and of course on the other ones I can't change anything, so yeah. So that was code rules, and you can see create variables, and there's a lot of expressions in there. It's very powerful actually, because if you have all kinds of code that you don't want to keep any longer, you can actually just pull it out of there. So if you actually want to pull out a lot of complex expression for hiding fields, you can actually do it instead of that one. And I'm running a little short on time here. Menu suites. You have a menu suite for the classic client now. And if you click on the customers button, with plural customers, it actually opens up a customer card for a single customer. And that's kind of like weird. In the rotor client, it's all changed, so it actually, now you go to the list first, and then you go to the cart after that one. And I have a menu suite in here, and let me go find that one. I have a menu suite. I had a menu suite. Let me, I guess I didn't got it imported. So that's my menu suite. Okay, so now I have a menu suite, and you can see there's a menu suite number 10, and there's a 1010. And the rotor client actually used the one with 1010 in there. You could go ahead and simply go in and say, yeah, export this one in text, change it, and then try modifying. There is a transformation tool that can actually assist you with that one. And this one, let me just export it here. And this one, by the way, don't work on XML. It actually works on text files instead. So I want to export that one as text. And then go and find my transformation tool for the menu suite in here instead. And let's go, it's a form. And the form number down here is menu suites. I'll go run that one. There's no menu, there's no anything, by the way, for this transformation tool. It's all kind of like you just do things and it actually shows up. But in here I have an import function, and I can then go and find my NAV TechDays transformation tool, my menu suite in here. And it now imported the menu suite. It created a new record. And if I go look at my menu, I can actually see some forms, and I see a report that's being run down here. So it's a pretty basic menu suite actually. But this one, commission, shipment description, I can see in here it's actually running a form 5011. And if I looked at it, that would actually be my cart. So I could go in here and replace it, but there is a function that actually will use all the data in your transformation one. So if you have a cart form for a list, it will actually go ahead and make that suggestion for you. The other thing it also do, you can see now, it actually saying, hey, it's actually supposed to be this one, but it's actually replacing with that one. So when you're exporting this transformation, it will go ahead and replace it with this item instead. Another thing is something here saying department code, and I will leave it as it is for now and show what it actually do wrong in here. Because these pieces are what is called administration instead of actually something that should go in the regular lists. And I'll export this one to menu suite 1058. Yeah, export, yeah. I said the right thing, I just didn't do it. So, yeah. So I have exported it to my menu suite, and I'll go import it here and see if I can compile it. And it actually compiles fine, is my guess, yeah. If I go here in the rotor client and look at my department menu, this one is not dynamic at all. The only way to catch that new menu suite is actually to close the rotor client and open it again. And even that one sometimes is quite a challenge. If you have actually users connected to the service tier, it will never refresh that menu suite. It will keep on running the old version of it, I think, until every user logs out. It can be a real challenge to actually get the service tier to actually figure out that you actually did another one. If I click here on list, I can see suddenly it's like I had a list of all kinds of things, and suddenly my setup shows up with a commission group that was one of my add-ons in here. That's really not what I wanted. And the reasoning is, here in the menu suite, there's a new property on every menu item. If I go down here to sales, setup, commission group, if I look at the properties, there's something in here that is called department. And I have list and I have task, and that's like list of customers, list of vendors, list of items, but not setup, because setup is actually called administration. History is posted documents. Documents is like sales orders, and I can do reports also in here. And then I have task that is basically card forms or worksheets, something like that one. So this one should really have been administration, and I can go change it here But I can actually also change it in here manually and say this one actually I wanted to have all these ones in the administration part. It's not editable to begin with, but it's that inline kind of editing thing here. So then you actually change it to administration instead in here. And I can go and export it. And I'll just do number 2 of that one. This one where it's get real tricky sometimes to make it actually catch it. Compiling it a couple of times makes it work sometimes. And one reason in here is saying, okay, why even bother doing this one? Because if I actually look at my list now, it's actually gone. And I can go look at my administration in here, and I have my commission groups down here. Wouldn't I just put it in the role center where I actually needed it? And there's one good reason to have something in the department code, and that's actually this very neat search function up here. If you didn't have it in the menu suite, it will not be able to find anything. It don't search within the role center, it only searches in the department menu. So that's one reason you need to have it, and it's kind of neat, and it's actually showing you where you actually go in and find them. So you can see this one actually exists 2 places. And I can even click on it, and I'm actually in there, exactly in that list where it is, and so on. It's one of those things that if you normally used to go to the classic client and try hunt for a setup issue, in the Rotel client you go up here and search, and it shows you exactly where it is actually in the menu. So you don't have to remember these 1,000 different forms for where they decided to put them in here. The search button is just a very good way of doing that. So, yeah, I'm almost at the end here of this page translation.txt. If you have looked at the 2009 original transformation tool, there was actually nothing called page translations.txt. In some countries, Microsoft actually decided to change some of the text in the pages, but not modify the forms for actually make it go through like the captions in there. So there actually is different captions on something than there is in the form and so on. And you can actually go do what is called page translation, and you basically export the translation export for all the pages, and then at the end of the transformation, you actually read those ones into the object. And I already have it in here, so I actually have my page translation.txt. Let me copy that one and go here in my transformation tool and just paste that file in here. So I have this page file called page transformation.txt, and if I wanted to create it, I would basically go in here and say for every page, tools, translate, export, and you call it page translation.txt. It's the only name that works. You can't call it anything else actually. But if I now go run my transformation, execute that up here, it used to say importing, or the transformation is complete. Now there's new importing localized strings. This one have all kinds of issues with Unicode to 256 character set conversions and things like that one. So it works great in English, but almost any other language that have weird characters in it. French is a really bad example of it. It will actually make code that is completely different from what it actually came with for many issues. So it kind of solves it for the worldwide product and maybe for the US product in one of the languages, UK too. But anything else, actually, you have to still import the language module as you used to, because transformation will also strip out all languages. It will only leave the ENU in there or whatever was in the form, actually. So you just import the language module when you're actually done with all the transformation at the end. So, yeah. And it even causes having this page translation in here, if there actually is a single quote in the text, and it happens a lot in French, where you have, or in French, it will actually make the objects not being able to import it, and it will even blow up the structure so you can't even import the information in there again. So as I say here, it's better to solve by simply importing the language modules. Okay, one last thing, and I'm actually done in here, and let's go to the Rotel client and run a report in here. And you see, first of all, I get an error, and that's actually kind of intentional. And I've had my reports, sales, reports and analysis. And I'll go down here. I had my EDI send and receive report, and as I run that one, I haven't done anything to this report yet. So first of all, it tells me, hey, it's not working. I'm trying to launch the classic client in here because I don't have a layout and I don't have a request page. So it's actually launching the classic client in here, and in somehow my connection is untrustworthy, and I didn't have time to fix it, so I don't know why it's not doing it. But let me fix that report anyway, because let me first show what it actually is doing in here. Let me filter on the 50,000 to 50,999 again. And this one is my report. If I look at it, I have a request form with some checkboxes. And if I look at my layout, it's nothing in here. It's basically just a processing only batch job. So the first thing to do is actually to create, oh, I shouldn't have closed it. Because when you look at here, there's something in here called request form and request page actually. And the transformation tool can actually build request pages for you in here. So let's go export this one. And it's kind of awkward. You actually have to call it forms.xml. Then run the transformation tool. And you see it sets a little different number up here. And then when I now import my report again as pages.xml, and see it's uncompiled, so I just imported it. If I now design it and view my request page, my checkboxes have now been converted for. So the transformation tool also deals with the request pages. There's no options of any kind in here because it's always a card and it always converted right that way. So let me go try run it and see if it's now a trustworthy report in here. It still isn't. And what the issue is, I actually have a layout. So because I haven't converted the layout yet to RDL, it's still actually giving me an error. So let's go in here and say, yeah, this layout makes no sense anyway. So this one is actually a processing only report. And then I should be able to click it here. And now it actually launches. I just got all these checkboxes in here. So this one is, if you have a pretty complex way of doing this one, you can do a transformation of it. You cannot do radio buttons, so it only do certain things up here. Yeah. Okay, so I showed you basically everything transformation is, and one thing I left out is matrix forms. And everybody have heard the hassle of matrix forms. Basically, you have to take a matrix form and replace it with a totally different form because there's no functionality like it. It's typically a request form that you have where you put in the filters, then you launch a button, and it feeds a value into a table that has 32 columns. And then it's placed with the caption and things like that one. It's pretty easy to figure out how it does, but it takes way too long to actually show how to do a matrix form in here. So, but let's show what the merge tool actually can do for transformation. And let's go back to the classic client in here and actually open up another FOB file. And it's a version higher than yesterday because there was a bug in the menu suite. So now importing the merge tool, and if I go refresh my, oops, I don't want to save that one. Refresh my menu suite, I'll see that I get the merge tool up here. And I have something that is called transformation. And now there's actually a menu suite where I can go into transformation forms, but I have to go into my setup first and basically put in my path in here. So that's why I have my transformation tool. And I have some options down here. What is my default objects filter? It should be from 50,000 from 599, and a version code filter. I'll leave that one blank for now. I can also go down here and import my page type mapping. And I'll go find that form to page type mapping file as I had before in here. So if I now look at my transformation forms in here, there's really nothing in here. This one is a totally different object number. It's a totally different form that actually is running in here. So the first thing to do is actually to go in here and actually import my import all transformation input. Same way as I started out with the other one, I'm actually now just importing the data. If I go here and look at 50,011, for example, I can see all my data that I put in here for fact boxes and things like that one. is actually in here. So you can use this one, you can use the other one, and you can always switch simply by actually importing your files in here. One of the reasons for doing this one is, first of all, everything that relates to an object is actually on an object button. Something I haven't talked about is actually something about captions, and I really wanted to wait to this point because there are certain things that are actually done by caption. So if you have a caption called job card, it actually adds the report automatically to it, and things like that one. This one, you can actually edit this one and add your own features in here. So if you have something that in your application is very common, you don't have to promote that action or add the image on all of it. You actually just go add them in the list here. And there's all kinds of things that can be done by caption. You can also do big images and shortcuts and actions and all kinds of things. But really, if you do a small thing, you don't have to do anything to actually do this one. The other thing it has up here is actually an object export filter. And over here under functions, you could, for example, go in and say, when I look at this form and trying to figure out what it is, it would be really neat to just run the form to actually see it. And hey, it's a card with a subform on it. And the nice thing is export and run transformation. So instead of having all these many steps, this one actually do everything. It export the text or the XML file. It export all the transformation input. It tried to launch my transformation file in here, and you see it's a unsecure thing. And then it actually failed, because one thing I didn't put in here was actually that I have a alternative transformation. I want to run my bat file because I really want to see that it actually works in here. So I have execute.bat, and I will have to modify my bat file slightly. So I actually go in and say I want to switch to my C drive, and I think I have that one in my paste buffer, yes. So I actually want to switch to that folder in here, and that would actually make it work. So now I can go in and simply do a export and run, and it should actually run everything for me at that time here. Then now it runs the export. It's done. Import the objects, and you can't yet compile actually from C side, so that's the only thing you actually have to do manually after this one actually ends. So that's what's going to be in here. The other thing is I actually looked at all kinds of things, and if I go here and import in the merge tool, let's go export these forms in here. And I actually set up my merge tool. That's it. I go import my object text file, and this one is forms. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it gets you every time. It is. And I don't need to put any of that in. I imported my forms. I'll go down here and say, okay, under setup, what is my version that I want to look at? And it's actually a filter, so you can look multiple places. You could also go out here and say, I also want to look at W1 or something in that one. So you only needed your modified in here. If I now go back in my transformation forms, go down to object and look at new control properties, I can go out here and actually now look up, and this one actually shows you that here's a menu button, here's a menu item list. If I wanted to delete menu items or delete page controls, I can actually look up and it actually shows me parent relation and all kinds of things like that one in here. Yeah, there's more to it actually, but I want to go through the last slides here. There's two tools actually in here more. To make your promotion consistent, you can actually go down here under 2009 transformation, calculate your promotions. See, now it puts everything in a list, and you can basically go and select the image and the action here, out here by simply going out and actually looking at it. And if I look at the image, I have an option down here, C:/temp/images. It actually now imports them and you even can see them. The same lookup form is actually used now in the transformation tool, so you have a picture of the things in here also. The same you can actually do from essential fields also. So one thing that is really good before you do anything is actually to do a code cleanup. You really need to remove excessive code from forms, because you had code on forms now you have the same code on the page also. So if you have a menu item with 50 lines of code, now you have to maintain that twice if you want to run transformation. A lot of times you also need to add your menu items to the list. So the one piece of code that was 50 lines is actually now copied to 200 lines. That is kind of a nightmare of maintenance. The same about adding multiple lists. It actually sometimes improves your application, even in the classic client, to have multiple lists for the same card forms. So, yeah. One thing about partial transformation, don't ever do it. And I want to show you one example in here that is a really important thing to actually take away from this one. So see, if I go in here and do form 46, and I export that form 46 to my forms.xml. Form 46 is a sales order subform, and if I look in the Rotel client right now, I have on my lightning bolt, I have a bunch of things referring to a line, for example. That's actually menu items that are used from my, or moved from my card form down to my list form in the classic client. If I run the transformation for this one by itself, and go filter on this one and say all and compile this one. Everything compiled nicely here. If I go look at it now, in my lightning bolt, suddenly everything is gone actually. Because in the classic client, you don't have any code at all on that form. It actually code that during transformation moves from the header to the line actually. So if you do a partial translation of anything like that one, menu items disappear, everything compiles, but it's not here any longer. And it's one of those real nasty things. And that's why, in general, you almost have to do a complete transformation all the time. You can work one object at a time, but when you're releasing, it's actually the complete application in here. So this one is going to be available. I'm going to make these ones available in here, and it's actually time now. So one of the things in here is actually about experience from doing this one. 95 to 100% of forms can actually typically be done in a few days, and you can actually get a view on your application to see how it actually works. You need 30 to 50% more objects compared to what you're actually used to in the classic client. It's fact boxes, it's additional lists, row centers, activities, matrix replacement, and actually recoding of functionality. Fact boxes, as you saw, is extremely easy to add and really makes it look very, very nice compared to the classic client. And a lot of things that you used to do in the form, like adding images, you would actually do a fact box for the image, and that's actually how it was and so on. Obsolete function is a real killer, and that's the one that can take you months to actually get your application ready. Shell commands for printing labels, for example, importing, exports of files, and all kinds of things like that one. So automation is typically the way to deal with that one. So what else? Any questions? Except I need a half an hour more. Okay. You can always come down here, so everybody else can go down to lunch then. So there's a couple of good walkthroughs in the online help, and if you have a decent sized application, it's actually make a lot of sense to at least work with somebody that knows about it, because you can easily spend 2 months just trial and error and banging your head against a stupid little error and not getting anywhere. So, but else, thank you for your attention.